So just a quick bit of instruction to our four panelists here. We have two microphones, and I think the deal is just to pass it back and forth, so two of you can share one. I am Kelly Parker, and let me first of all thank Leslie Newman for organizing this and inviting us to join you here this morning. I'm really excited about this. We're changing the format up. I've talked at C3 a couple of times before, but as we were discussing this, I thought, you know, I would really like to hear from my students what they're thinking about the world at this point. Not that I don't hear that, but maybe not in the way that we're going to take it on this morning. So Leslie agreed that that sounded interesting. And so we've got a little bit of a different format. I'll introduce our students here in a second and get us underway. I've been at Grand Valley forever. I know many of you because you've been at Grand Valley in one way or another over the years too. And in recent years, I've been closely involved with the Environmental and Sustainability Studies program. This is an interdisciplinary program, so we're not environmental science. We are more the go-betweens, the translators, the implementers, but focused on environment and sustainability. We introduced the program in 2008 as a minor. It got a lot of interest, went along great. Came time maybe 6 years ago to start talking about making this a major. And I did a stint as program director, and that was my major effort during that time. And we now have an environmental and sustainability studies major. And that, yeah. We introduced it 3 years ago, I think, at the beginning of the academic year 3 years ago. And of course, we've had COVID in here. But so this is the third year, and the program has grown like wildfire. We've got 170 students majoring in this important field. 4 of them, well, 3 of them here. Megan O is a friend of the program. And so this is really the first year that we've got a big graduating class too, because it takes 3 years to complete all the requirements. So exciting things. There's been a ripple effect across campus, right? Now that this thing exists, it's a space for students and faculty who are concerned about environmental issues or who want to explore more. Not only has it attracted a lot of students, but we've got 2 new full-time faculty coming into the program this fall, which is, if you know about higher education funding, that's remarkable, but we need it to accommodate the growth. So all good, and I'm seeing a ripple effect across campus. My colleagues from other departments are saying, hey, if I developed a course in this, would that have a place in your program? I said, let's run with it. So it's an exciting time. And the best part of my job is that I get to work with some of the most passionate, smart, hardworking, enthusiastic, wonderful students that I've ever worked with in 35 years in higher education. So really fortunate. And an example of that is I put out a call. I said, hey, we're doing this thing at C3. It might be a little weird to you, but trust me, it'll be good. And I got 4 volunteers. I was hoping for 2, so that gives you an idea of how great they are. So the format here, I'll introduce them, and then I've got a few questions here, but I'm thinking dialogue. And so I'll put the first question out. I think we'll start by hearing from each of the 4 their thoughts about that. And then, if you want to pick up and respond to each other, let's just run with it. And if things start to trail off, I'll throw out another question. If we get all the way through my questions, great. If we don't, great. So let me introduce everybody, and I will start over here on your left. Jade Phillips. Our first Megan Holm. Our second Megan Leskowitz. And Anna Watson behind me. There we go. So, and thank you to the 4 of you for taking a beautiful Sunday morning and coming in here to do this. So I think we have about 20 minutes-ish. Somebody flag us down if we go over. So I will put the first question, and we can just grab a microphone and get going. So the question I'm asking the students to lead off: what future do you and your friends envision for yourselves, for society, or for the planet?
I'm the only one who brought a notebook, so I guess I'll just read from here. So a future for society in which it doesn't have to be a privilege to have access to the choice of being environmentally friendly or conscious. A future for my friends and I that restores our faith in being able to say that the generations after us will prioritize the earth, knowing that we are connected to it, not above it. And a future for the planet in which its health and livelihood is no longer a debate, and a future that allows for healing and regeneration. Okay.
Do you want to go? Okay. You go. Okay, so Megan put that beautifully, but I guess for me, I see two futures. I see one that I'm hopeful for and one that I see that's a little bit more realistic. I'm hopeful that we'll definitely be a more green, or see a more green future. I think we're starting to move in that direction a little bit. But a more realistic future, I'm worried that we're not moving in that direction fast enough, and I hope people realize that we need to change our mindsets. And so I guess in the future, my end goal would be that people have more greener mindsets towards caring for the earth.
Okay, I'll go now. Sorry, microphones are not my friend. Can you guys hear me? All right. I agree with both of what these beautiful ladies have said so far, but I would like to just add that I hope that we take more compassion for our ancestors and what they did to get us here now, and for one another, just to tie it into this week's theme.
Building off of that, I also hope for a future where everyone understands the interdisciplinarity of all of the topics we'll probably cover this morning, which just means that everything is tied together in one way or another, and all of these systems that we've created build off of each other. So.
Any crosstalk? Anybody want to respond to each other?
I do, actually.
Okay.
So, as Professor Parker mentioned, I actually am not an environmental studies student. I'm an integrative studies student. So basically, I chose to emphasize in environmental studies. But I wanted to move off your point about just the future being more interdisciplinary, and I think that is, you hit it on the head. I think my education in the interdisciplinary studies program has opened my eyes to how important it is that we cross with these different disciplines and understand how everything relates to one another. So I think you made a really good point about moving forward, not being so single-minded in certain ways and just allowing your mind to be expanded to new ideas and different practices, I guess.
All right, thank you. The next question, and I did provide these ahead of time, so these aren't just totally gotcha out of the blue. Although that would be kind of funny, wouldn't it?
Not for us.
So my next question is, what do you see happening now that's encouraging, and what do you see happening now that's discouraging?
I can go first. I think what is most discouraging for me right now is the amount of pollution in every sense, but especially, I don't know if anyone else has recognized right now, mostly like a few weeks ago when the snow started melting, but the amount of waste that is along the highways and along the roadways once the snow melted away is just so discouraging. And the fact that we are in the Great Lakes watershed as well, so all of that trash will move with the water towards the lakes, which then pollutes the waters, which we need to live. I think that's probably what's most discouraging, and a lot of that is plastics, one-use plastics, wasteful things that we don't really need. But in an encouraging sense, Padnos, is it Padnos Recycling Center, downtown Grand Rapids. They are doing amazing work with plastics and turning plastics back into little pellets that can be used to make new products. And so it's very much so a circular economy that they're kind of building. And they just made a deal for ocean-bound plastics, that they are now starting to take those in and make those into pellets, and they're being collected all over the Virgin Islands and everywhere and bringing them to the Padnos Center, where they're then making the pellets and making them into new products. And that just happened a couple weeks ago. So they are taking some really cool steps in the right direction, I think.
I think something that's super encouraging is, after COVID, seeing more people relate to the fact that environmentalism is so intersected and connected in a lot of ways. I think it kind of brings about the sense of urgency. But what we talked about in the pre-talk, I think another thing that's discouraging is just, like a lack of urgency and empathy. I think a lot of people don't like to act on things until it affects them personally. So that's definitely something that we want to see increasing.
So going off the pollution and the plastics, something I find discouraging is something called greenwashing. Basically, it's where you can market a product as being environmentally friendly, but it's not. So that's something that really bothers me, because it's basically just lying. But in that sense, something I see as a benefit is just, I think overall our society is moving towards a greener future. As I mentioned before, we're seeing a lot more green movements happening that in the past you wouldn't have seen. And I think just environmentalists as a community is being more accepted. One thing, I work at a restaurant, so there's a lot of plastic waste that goes through there. And I was flipping through our catalog for whatever my boss orders for the restaurant, and I noticed that there was a marketed bio-friendly or plant-based plastic that they were selling that was compostable to restaurants for them to use and to be more environmentally friendly. And I noticed at the very bottom in the asterisk there said only compostable in a a manufactured facility. And so I made the comment that I was oh wow, just more, in a sense, greenwashing. But then my boss said back to me yeah, but if you think about it, at least we're moving in the right direction. These are steps we're taking that are leading us to where we need to be. So that kind of made me just rethink a little bit how overall it's encouraging that we are moving in a more greener fashion. However, I will say I think that we need to pick up the pace on it a little bit.
Thank you. So I am definitely discouraged by the unending list of poor choices that we have been making as human beings. We could talk about it for far too long, but I am very encouraged by the growing conversations that I've been witnessing in spaces like this. And I'm not sure if it's just me being niched into a group or if it truly is a growing conversation, but I see a lot of talk about returning to more subsistence-based ways of life, about learning from ancestral wisdom and returning to more indigenous roots. And I find that to be very encouraging, because recognizing the way that this is all interconnected and having respect for one another and for the earth, for all that it gives us and sustains, is truly beautiful, and I think could help us with a lot of the issues that we face today. But that is simultaneously discouraging to me, because when I see a lot of settlers discussing things like personal sovereignty and food sovereignty without also taking accountability for the ways that our ancestors committed an ongoing act of genocide, it's a little bit shallow, maybe. So I hope that we can find balance in our actions by continuing these types of conversations and continuing to look at what we do with our money and with our actions.
I want to say a couple of words kind of picking up on what Jade just said. As an environmental educator for a long time, a theme that comes up every time we get in these conversations, every time we get into a class looking at the many, many, many interwoven problems and the history of how we got it here, is despair, right? It's that big gray, blah, yuck elephant in the room always. And, you know, I feel like as an educator, I have a responsibility to help my students come to terms with that, because it's a real thing. You know, if you just read through the list, right, which you can get, you know, any book at, go to the Bookman, shop local, get your environmental education books there. But you can go through the list, and it does quickly become overwhelming. For what it's worth, here's where I've ended up and where I try to get my students, is that we need to be aware of the scope of things, and the interdisciplinary work we do shows us the dynamics, shows us how social justice is related to questions, you know, technical questions like the design of the energy grid, right? We start to see those connections. So you need to be aware of those, but you also need to be aware that no one of us as an individual can change those things. So what are we responsible for? How do we get up in the morning? How do we do the work? I'm responsible for me, right? My choices, to be informed, to live with integrity, hopefully to be a good influence on others, especially since in my particular case, that's like my job, right? I'm supposed to help my students cope better. And there's an awful lot of hoping for the best that comes after that, right? No easy answers, but I hope honest answers help with this. So my 2 cents on that. That said, let's go on to our next question. What is it you hope for?
Oh, okay. I guess kind of going off of what Professor Parker said, something about how environmental justice is also things like social justice and racial justice. I think that I hope in the future we just continue to include more marginalized communities. Definitely, they're affected way more than, you know, probably many of us in this room are, honestly. And I think that's super important to remember, because that's something that we haven't in the past, and that's what's gotten us here. Yeah, so just kind of being a voice for those communities and giving them a platform, for sure, is definitely on the top of the list for me, at least.
I definitely hope more people can make the connections between like environmental problems and other problems in society. For instance, going off the marginalized communities, like I don't think very many realize how much these kind of disasters can exacerbate inequalities and make them worse. And then also another thing, impacting health. I don't think people realize how much of an impact on health that will have, which then again will impact inequalities more. So my hope is definitely that they'll just, as I've mentioned many times before, be an overall understanding and awareness of all of this. And also to go off of what Jade was saying, to learn from the traditional practices and indigenous peoples, because I think that there's a lot of knowledge there that could be taken and applied and we can learn from, to not necessarily change entirely what we're doing, but to move forward in a way that's more sustainable and more conscious of saving the planet and taking care of our home, because at the end of the day, this is all of our home, and if without it, we wouldn't be here. And I think people forget that principle, that we all live on this earth, and it's our job to protect it if we want to prosper, I guess.
Sorry. So these conversations make my heart beat really fast and my palms sweaty because it is scary to think about all the things that we are doing wrong. And really my hope is that we can find a sense of community in essentially gratitude for the fact that we are here. And even with all the mistakes that we've made and the lack of security in our future, that we can have a little bit of faith or hope that it will turn out well, maybe. I'd like to say beautiful, but that might be too idealistic because without that, it is simply too sad. It is too depressing to keep going, and I don't know how to be of service to people when I am weighed down by the fear of what may happen. But I also feel necessary to recognize that feeling the fear and talking through it with others is absolutely a necessary step in moving towards a more compassionate future. So.
I think my main hope is that we can have more conversations like this, kind of open-minded people all in the same room without any hostility involved. I think that is a very important concept. I also hope that more circular economies can be brought about, like the one I was mentioning with plastics. There's definitely more ways we can be better in the same way with agriculture and reusing products that would other be disregarded as waste. And even in like the clothing industry and fashion industry, there's definitely ways that we can improve there too.
Okay, never mind. I can't remember anymore.
You want to go?
Go ahead.
Welcome to life. It's like, I had a great idea 3 seconds ago. Where did it go? I'm standing here realizing I utterly failed to correctly read the clock, so I don't know how long we have left when we started. 5 minutes? Okay, I think what I want to do, my next question is what worries you, but I think we've already heard that. It came out, right? That's right there at the top of everybody's mind. So I'm going to jump to the last question, which is, what do you need? And I left it deliberately open like that. So what do you need?
I need support. That question actually reminded me of a story that I told in the discussion group before, but I was at the grocery store one time, and it was when I had like entered my environmentalist journey, I guess you can say, and it was only like a year and a half ago. So this is still all very like new to me and I've just opened my mind to this concept. But I was at the grocery store, and I made it my goal to, for the year, cut down my use of plastic. So I asked the store clerk, I don't know what the proper term is, the cashier to bag my groceries in paper. And then he proceeded to put my paper bags in plastic bags. So I kindly said, no, like I'm just trying to cut down on plastic. It's my goal for the year. I'm just trying to be more environmentally friendly. And he looked at me and said, well, it's not going to make a difference anyway. So in my mind immediately, like that's the mindset right there that is preventing us from moving forward towards a more sustainable future. And so back to my point of support, what I need from people is to have an open mind to this concept of environmentalism and view it as a beneficial thing. We're not trying to attack anybody, that we're not trying to do any harm. We're only trying to benefit everybody and create a better earth. Which leads me to another story of when I was on vacation a couple weeks ago, and somebody had asked me what I'm studying, and I mentioned environmental studies. And they came back with the comment, well, isn't it just a bunch of nearsayers or that study that kind of stuff? And I was like, if people would just be more supportive and understanding of the kind of stuff that we're studying, that it is important, and it's not something that can just be thrown off to the side or something that people who don't really care about school study. It's something that we are passionate about, and it's something that needs to be addressed and be in people's minds and be a concern.
I'm just going to go off that and say that I also need support. And I think I'm just going to list things that I can assume we all need, aside from food, water, shelter. I think we all need compassion and community and love. And in terms of creating a more environmental, sustainable future, we need time and commitment and funding. So I severely lack the funds at my ripe age of 22, so can't really help with that one at the moment. But in sharing time with me, I get to learn and I feel more supportive. So I'm grateful, very grateful for that. And yep.
I think something that I need that I wrote down is just to remember that it's totally fine to not be like a perfect consumer or activist. It's really hard to wake up every day and try and fight this fight when you realize that you're operating under a system that wants infinite growth with a finite amount of resources. And yeah, it's just tough to literally say that you're going to dedicate your life to saving a dying thing. It's sad for sure, but it's definitely okay to not be perfect and to just like give yourself some patience and rest every now and then. I think is definitely something that I need most every day.
I think I'm just going to say the open-minded conversations again. I think that there's a lot that we can do that we don't always recognize because people avoid the conversations. And there's a lot that goes into different sustainability things as well. And in order to support the environment and protect the environment, it doesn't always have to decrease profit or harm anyone. There's a lot of different practices out there that can both help gain more profit as well as benefit the environment and protect people's health. And so I think just more conversations need to be had.
I just want to briefly touch on the meditation that was delivered to us earlier. I think that the analogy of every person being a drop in the ocean is very relevant here because not only do we need support, but we need to recognize that we can't do it all on our own, and it is only through community that we will actually make these changes, because individually we're on our own journey that must combine with somebody else's to actually make that big difference.
Thank you so much. I want to pick up on a theme that I see coming out in this last part and say one of the distinctive things about what we're trying to do in environmental and sustainability studies is it's activist. We want our students to be learning not just the information, the facts, the knowledge that they need to understand what's going on, but to learn what it takes to make a change. And that change is always a community change, right? Whether it's water resources or energy and climate change or sustainable food systems or the way we build our communities. Those are did you catch that? I worked in the 4 focus areas there from our program. Whichever aspect of this work you're doing, it always involves people getting out there, getting involved, organizing in community, and that's where the change comes from. And I just got to say, these 4 are graduating either in about 2 weeks or at the end of the fall semester. And I hope you've got the confidence and the knowledge and, what you need at this point to go out and do that. Welcome to the next step, everybody. We are here, and I hope we can give you that support and that help you need. So, should I save the reading for the end because I thought this would work well as a summing up. This is from herself, a young environmental activist, Leah Thomas, from a book titled Intersectional Environmentalism. I have it written here anyway. Here's the reading. The earth shouldn't be taken for granted, nor should its people. And the drivers of this exploitation, greed, racism, capitalism, and other systems of oppression, should be rejected and dismantled. If we combine social justice efforts with environmental awareness efforts, we will harness enough power, representation, and momentum to have a shot at protecting our planet and creating equity at the same time. Thank you.